to a Juneteenth celebration hosted by the Altadena Historical Society and the Altadena Library District. My name is Ashley Watts, and I would like to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for a joyous occasion in honor of the African American culture, both past and present. As a mother of 3 young Black boys, it is an honor to be sitting here to assist in highlighting the presentation you will see today on African American history in Altadena. Many thanks to Steve McCall and Veronica Jones for coordinating this event. Before we begin, I'd like to explain what Juneteenth is and why it is important. Juneteenth, also called Emancipation Day or Black Independence Day, commemorates the end of slavery in the U.S. Despite the Emancipation Proclamation being declared on January 1st, 1863, it was not until June 19, 1865, that enslaved Black people were truly declared as free. Juneteenth became a state holiday in Texas in 1980, and a number of other states followed suit. Thanks to the efforts of activists in the 2000s, Juneteenth became a federal holiday in 2021. In fact, it was the first new federal holiday since Martin Luther King Jr. Day was adopted in 1983. Juneteenth not only celebrates the freedom of African Americans from slavery, but it is also a time to honor the culture and achievements of our past and present. I hope you enjoy the rest of this event, share something new you learned today with a loved one, and make the culture of African Americans a daily celebration outside of Juneteenth. I'm so bummed that I could not be here to celebrate with you today. However, I encourage you to sit back, relax, and enjoy a wonderful event. Thank you all, and happy Juneteenth.
Roberta Richardson, President of the Altadena NACP, and your MC for today. We're going to bring up Nikki Winslow, the Director of the Altadena Library, to give a special acknowledgement.
All right, to start, I'm going to be doing our land acknowledgement statement. The Altadena Library District acknowledges its presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. Altadena is located on the stolen homelands of the Hahamanga tribal band. The traditional territory of the Gabrielino Tongva is referred to as Tabangar, which includes the areas currently known as Los Angeles County, Riverside County, West San Bernardino County, parts of Orange County, as well as the 4 Southern Channel Islands. Entities such as the U.S. government and non-native settlers have subjected the Gabrielino Tongva peoples to historic and continuing injustices, including genocide, forced displacement, and cultural and linguistic erasure. Altadena Library commits to learning, educating, and informing its staff and residents of present-day Altadena about the rich histories, vibrant communities, and culture of Gabrielino Tongva people, present and past, through our collection development, resources, and programming offerings. Thank you. Now just a few remarks. Again, my name is Nikki Winslow. I'm the district director here. Welcome to this amazing celebration. Juneteenth at the Altadena Library is a celebration of our diverse community and a reminder of our responsibility to create an equitable and inclusive world for all of our neighbors. We are grateful to each of you for joining us today to gain knowledge and help us give back to the community. The vision of the Altadena Library District is an Altadena where everyone is learning, growing, and thriving together. To achieve that vision, our library district works every day at being an inclusive and empowering space for families and individuals of all identities. Today and throughout the year, we demonstrate that commitment through programming, collections, and services that support communities affected by marginalization and discrimination. We are a few weeks into our summer reading program, and I encourage each of you to visit a service desk after this program. We have activities and programs for people of all ages, encouraging our neighbors to make this a summer of learning, exploring, and connecting. We are thrilled to host the Juneteenth celebration at our main library. Thank you to the organizers for giving us this great honor and opportunity. And every day of the year, this library is always a first stop for anyone on a journey towards equity and empowerment. Again, welcome, and I truly hope you are inspired and uplifted by this program.
We'd like to bring up Jane Brackman with the Altadena Historical Society. The Historical Society is the organization which uncovered all of this great history about Alan Garrison Clark.
Thank you so much for coming. My name is Jane Brackman, and I'm the president of Altadena Historical Society. I wanted to tell you very quickly a little bit what an archives does, which is what we are. Whereas libraries collect and store published material in general, archives are collections of historical documents and records providing information about a place, a time, and people. Archives consist of primary or first-hand facts, data, evidence. They're from personal collections more than printed material, and they're retained for their long-term value and provide a source for research. Archives should be authentic, reliable, usable, and provide enough content to give a coherent picture of a community. Unfortunately, archives are often reflections of the people who create the collections. And in Altadena's case, if you go back and look at what we have in the archives, that would include mostly privileged, rich, white people. Like AHS, this means that minority communities are left out of local history, and the archival content, such as that we have, isn't sufficient to provide a truthful and coherent picture of the past. So we are depending on the community to help right this wrong, to create a more comprehensive and accurate picture of Altadena's past. Our goal was initiated last year with the recognition of civil rights activist Ellen Clark. And we are committed to make this an ongoing permanent partnership, starting with our first Ellen Garrison Clark Scholarship Program. So thank you very much for coming.
So we will have the posting of colors by the Pathfinders from the Altadena Seventh-day Adventist Church and Girl Scout Troop 4601. I want you to pay attention to the third flag you may not have seen before. It's the Juneteenth flag. And if you would, stand as the flag passes you as witnesses. If you would remain standing, we're going to have Ariana Chisholm sing with Lady Wilson sing the Black National Anthem. Ariana is a member of the Alcadina and has won 4 years in a row a gold medal for the best contemporary vocalist in our Alcadina AXO competition. So if we would have Ariana come up.
lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place. Here we go. For which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading a path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might lead us into the light. Keep us forever on the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, oh God, where we met Thee. Bless our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadow beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land.
I'm always so impressed that everyone can sing acapella like that. Every note is totally beautiful. All right. So now I want to introduce Brianna Price. She's going to read us a poem by Amanda Gorman. She's a Columbia graduate and now an amazing actress. You may have seen her in a commercial.
Good afternoon. How you guys doing? When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, the seed we must wait. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what is just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow, we do it. Somehow, we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country in a time where a skinny black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting. And yes, we're far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose. To compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. Even as we hurt, we hoped. Even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade the hill we climb if we only dare. It is because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It is the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. And this truth and this faith we trust. For while we have eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of a just redemption. We feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour. But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while we once asked, how could we possibly prevail over a catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction and our inertia will be the inheritance of this next generation, become the future. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. In every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When the day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn balloons as we free it. For there is always light, if we're only brave enough to see it. if we're only brave enough to be it. Thank you.
Wow, this is a powerful word from the young man who was the youngest poet laureate of the United States when she was 21 when she came out. All right, so now we're going to have the main information we've been looking for here. We have a presentation of Altadena's hidden history, video presentations. Carrie Chastain from Sappho Ceremonial Inc. will be presenting, as well as Stephen McCall from Los Angeles Conservancy, Monica Jones from the Altadena Historical Society.
Thank you very much. Those were two very wonderful here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I was saying thank you very much. Those were two very powerful presentations, and I hope I did justice. Okay. Let me get my notes and one of my glasses. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present the results of the Altadena African American Historic Resource Survey in honor of Juneteenth. I am not familiar with this keyword, so please bear with me. There we go. This project was selected to support the county's efforts to be inclusive and in recognition that history has been told through a selective lens in the past. The county recognizes there's a bigger and better story to tell that everyone can benefit from. This project was intended to reflect more accurate and relevant history to more fully inform our lives. The project had 4 goals: to bring awareness to the community at large about Altadena's valuable African American history. The project identified persons, events, businesses, and institutions that were significant to the Altadena African American community. Future planning events can preserve these important resources and inform future events for listing properties in the County Register of Landmarks and Historic Districts. The county is sponsoring future efforts to develop historic context statements for the African American communities in its jurisdiction, and a future goal is to record all of these important histories. Because this was an end-of-the-year project, staff has had approximately 3.5 weeks to start and finish this project. The only way this project was successful was with significant involvement from the community. We hosted a community outreach meeting to inform the community of what we were trying to accomplish and to solicit input from the community. Veronica's valuable contribution was rallying the community to participate, and 11 oral histories were recorded. Additionally, we completed archival research in historic newspapers, census data, redlining maps, and anything we could find. For this project, staff has completed 2 tasks. A historic context statement was developed. Historic context statements are important because resources cannot be evaluated in a void. This is why public involvement was critical to the success of this project. As a result of this background research, 2 neighborhoods were identified as significant to the Altadena African American community, and they were surveyed to determine if they were eligible for historic district designation. The historic context statement focused on the early history of Altadena, trends in residential and commercial growth, and the identification of significant persons, institutions, and businesses in the Altadena African American community. Several themes and eligibility criteria were established in the development of the context statement. Themes included commercial, residential, and institutional development. The context statement is an important tool for creating the foundation for future work in the community and identifying additional topics for further study. The historic context statement is important to tell the history of a community, but also to establish criteria for evaluating the significance of a resource. Due to fiscal and schedule constraints, topics for future study were also included in the historic context statement. To begin with, I'll give a brief history of Altadena. Altadena is located between Pasadena and the Angeles National Forest, as you know. Altadena was founded in 1887 by brothers John and Fred Woodbury, who were originally natives of Iowa. The Woodbury's intent was to create a suburb for wealthy Pasadena. However, there was a real estate bust in 1888, and their dreams did not come true. Until the 1920s, the land was used by ranchers and also was home to orchards of walnuts and avocados and vineyards. However, eastern Altadena did develop as a wealthy suburb in the early 1900s, but was not part of the Woodbury's land holdings. Prior to the Woodbury's purchase of the land grant, Robert Owens, an ex-slave from Texas who purchased his freedom, came to the area. Owens started a lumber company acquiring material from El Prieto Canyon at the northern edge of Altadena, and went on to become a wealthy and influential African-American businessman. Owens held the first African-American church service in the county and is noted as an early African-American trailblazer in the area. Western Altadena generally remained agricultural land until the end of World War II. A residential boom occurred throughout Southern California as GIs returned from battle and the aerospace industry launched. As a result of redlining and other restrictive racial covenants, many African American families purchased properties that were being newly developed in this area. Western Altadena was also home to a significant Japanese American community. By the 1970s, Western Altadena was actively embracing diversity, and a campaign was begun to demonstrate inclusivity. Today, Altadena is a vibrant community interested in all of its histories. Several people were identified as significant to the Altadena African American community. For example, Tony Stewart was identified as significant as the founder of the Altadena branch of the NAACP, and she was a civil rights activist. Lieutenant Oliver Goodall was a Tuskegee Airman, and a memorial is located in front of his former residence. Veronica and Stephen will go into further detail in their presentation coming up next. Moving on to buildings, this is a map of the buildings and neighborhoods that were surveyed and documented for this project. 2 businesses, a church, and 2 neighborhoods were identified as significant within the community. The Little Red Hen has been owned by an African American family for over 50 years and is a beloved eating institution in the community. The Metropolitan Baptist Church is significant to the community and is a fabulous mid-century modern building. Research indicated the first AME church was founded in Altadena in the late 1800s. However, because the building is now located in Pasadena, it was not included in the survey, but was noted in the historic context statement. The Meadows was identified as significant as the first middle-class African-American neighborhood in Altadena. The period of significance was established as 1960, the year the neighborhood was established, until 1975. The county has a requirement that buildings be 45 years of age or older to be considered eligible for listing in the county's historical register, and this is how the 1975 end date was established. The residential buildings in the meadow were generally constructed between 1950 and 1970, with a few predating the period of significance and a few modern infill buildings. The first African American family to move into the area was the Sheets family in the late 1950s. In the following years, more Black residents chose the quiet and isolated areas home, including the Turner and White families. Isaac Turner worked in various leadership positions with the United Auto Workers and moved his family to the Meadows in 1962 after a real estate agent friend showed him the area by chance. When Mr. Turner arrived with his family, only 4 or 5 other Black families were living in this area. Charles White, whose son still lives in the neighborhood, was a celebrated 20th century artist whose drawings and paintings documented the struggles of his race and generation. By 1972, the area was predominantly filled with middle and upper class Black residents. Of the 225 properties containing single and multifamily residences in the Meadows, 13 were not evaluated because they were not visible from the public right-of-way. 157, or 74%, were identified as contributors, and 55 were identified as non-contributors due to alterations and/or constructed outside the period of significance. So the Meadows is eligible for designation as a county historic district. Residences in the, can you guys see the pointer? Okay, cool. Residences in the meadow are largely post and beam, as you see here, storybook ranch, which is a more ornate style of ranch. This is more traditional style of ranch or minimal traditional. Another neighborhood that was identified as significant within Altadena was what is known as the Cinch. The acronym the Cinch is derived from the names of the street that form the boundary of the neighborhood: Sacramento Street, El Sol Street, Neldham Street, Casita Street, and Hanning Avenue. Cinch was the first neighborhood watch group within Altadena and was started in 1972 by resident Joe Sharon. The work that Cinch did created a desirable area for the Black residents moving to Altadena and formed a concentration of Black residents around the streets it patrolled. The period of significance for Cinch is 1972, the year the group was founded. According to the Cinch's Neighborhood Improvement Association bylaws, its purpose was, quote, to eliminate crime, create a unity among neighbors, improve the overall physical appearance of the neighborhood, and to instill pride in the people of the community, end quote. The group worked to ensure the neighborhoods that were forming as so-called Black neighborhoods stayed physically appealing, united, and low in crime. Door-to-door contact and conversations with neighbors made sure that no one could point to the area as blighted or a reason to stop further integration. The Dots on the Map campaign a decade earlier highlighted this area as one which welcomed integration, and a prominent Black community grew around the streets which the watch group patrolled. The Dots on the Map campaign allowed residents to mail in a card stating they embraced integration and rejected redlining practices. The results were published in a map that would allow would-be home buyers to know which areas were more welcoming than others. The neighborhood was found to be significant to the community because residents hired guards and formed a neighborhood watch in response to racist police brutality. The area of significance was the period of significance was identified as 1972, the year the watch was formed. Of the 131 properties located within the Cinch boundaries, 97 were identified as contributors, and 34 were identified as non-contributors. As with the Meadows, 74% of the buildings were found to be unaltered and would contribute to a potential historic district. Typical residences in the neighborhood include minimal traditional that you see here on the left, Tudor revival that you can see here on the right, which is noted by the swoopy eaves, and ranch. Because we had 3.5 weeks to complete the project, important themes were identified that we simply couldn't cover in the context statement. The project also included recommendation for future studies such as the ones you see here. All research materials were donated to the Altadena Historical Society and the Altadena Library with the hope future research efforts will be continued. This project received a Historic Preservation Award from the Los Angeles Conservancy last year, and also won a Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion Award from the California branch of the Association of Environmental Professionals last year, and it has been submitted this year for a California Preservation, which is the statewide Historical Society award this year. Here are some sources of information. The Altadena African American Survey is available on the county's website at this address. The Altadena Historical Society is just down the street, well, around the corner. And this is my contact information. Dean Edwards is the, he works for County Regional Planning, and he runs the Historic Preservation Program, and this is their website. So I will just say thank you so much for your time, and I will turn it over to Veronica and Stephen at this point.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone.
You gotta put the microphone in your face.
Okay. Let me find our presentation here.
I just want to say thank you to everyone that came here. I know most of you know me, and I appreciate your support and you being here. I really do. Thank you.
Okay, and just a little bit of context about the survey and this presentation. It was the survey, as Carrie has pointed out, is really a big landmark in terms of historic preservation for Altadena. So it's really the survey has kind of put Altadena on the historic preservation map. So that was very important. It was through the Pasadena Senior Center that Carrie and Veronica and I were sort of married together, production-wise, and we came up with this presentation. So this is the third iteration of this presentation that we'll be sharing with you today. So to get started, now that Carrie has, talked about the survey and got to its importance, and we have some idea about the two historic areas, the Cinch and the Meadows. Veronica and I now will, spotlight some of the prominent African Americans from the Cinch and the Meadows. Okay, so we're gonna start with the Meadows, and Veronica, like I said, we're going to spotlight some of those early African American people and businesses. Some of the people and places are identified in the Southwoods Context Survey. Plus, we'll have some other notables who may or may not hail from either the Meadows or Cinch. So we'll be starting with Mr. Earl M Grant.
Mr. M. Earl Grant was a prominent African-American businessman in Altadena and throughout LA County. Grant was born in 1881 in West Virginia and moved to Pasadena in 1923. By 1924, he had owned and operated the Altadena Disposable Company. In addition, Grant started and owned a hog farm in El Monte from 1927 to 1952. The hog farm sold $10,000 worth of hogs per day. After being denied loans to buy Pasadena properties because of the color of his skin, he founded the Broadway Federal Bank in 1947. In 1949, he founded and managed the Watts Savings and Loans until 1967. He was head of Family Savings and Loans, one of the biggest black-owned savings and loans firms in the country. He had a fruit ranch in Fresno and many other business ventures. Grant was listed as 100 richest Negroes in the United States in a May 1962 issue of Ebony magazine. Grant has become the first African-American member of the Pasadena Community Redevelopment Agency in 1961. Grant believed that redevelopment was necessary in Pasadena, but he wanted it to include the entire population, including people of color, in the discussion of redevelopment. The hope was that having an African-American member on the board would prevent or reduce the effects of negative redevelopment on African Americans and other minority communities. The Altadena Disposable Company, established by Grant and his brother, was located at 603 Athens Street in Altadena. The business was a general garbage collection business that hauled and disposed of trash throughout LA County. It was the oldest garbage collection business in the Altadena area. By the 1940s, the company moved 30 tons of trash per day. The garbage disposal industry allowed Grant to network with other powerful white businessmen, which helped him to achieve many other great accomplishments in the business world. Now we're going to turn to notable and former resident of the Meadows, Charles White.
Okay, so when Carrie was doing her presentation, I heard some people recognize the name Charles White and also acknowledge that his son still lives in the Meadows. And as Carrie pointed out, he was a celebrated 20th century artist whose drawings and paintings documented the struggles of his race and generation. You may know that in the decades after World War II, tens of thousands of African Americans migrated to Southern California from other parts of the U.S. in what was became known as, or has come to be known as the Great Black Migration. In October 1956, Charles White's family was a part of that migration. In California, they first found a home in Pasadena at 1765 Summit Avenue. The following year, the White family moved to Altadena, to 936 Kent Street, very close to Oak Grove Park, which I think is kind of where the Hahamunga Nature Reserve is now. And it was a predominantly white community, which prompted a number of the other residents to move. So it was kind of an interesting question of the situation of the white family causing white families to move. In 1963, the Whites bought an acre of hillside and land in Altadena in the Meadows, where they started to build a home. Sometime around 1966, the White family moved to the new home on Rising Hill Road in Altadena. Charles White, in 1965, Mr. White began teaching at Otis Art Institute, now called the Otis College of Art and Design. Charles White was the first black artist to join the all-white faculty. In 1977, he was appointed a full professorship, and he became the chair of the drawing department at Otis Art Institute. In April 1978, Governor Edmund G. Brown appointed Mr. White to the advisory board of the new California Museum of Afro-American History and Culture, now known as the California African American Museum. Charles White died of congestive heart failure on October 3rd, 1979 at the young age of 61. He was in Wadsworth Veterans Hospital in Los Angeles at the time. At his memorial, his lifelong friend Sidney Poitier said of Mr. White, "Charlie was no angel in life, and I bet he's no angel now." I guess he was a character. In October 1980, the County of Los Angeles dedicated a park in Altadena in his honor, Charles White Park.
I think they're getting ready to redo that park.
Really?
Yeah, they are.
Great news.
It's a secret.
Didn't hear that from me.
Okay. So this is one of Mr. White's pieces. It's entitled "Move Up a Little Higher." And Veronica, you have a reminiscence you want to share?
Yes, last September, while visiting the African American Museum in our nation's capital, my daughter and I walked into the art gallery, and there was this painting, Charles White, a native Altadenian. I came all the way to Washington, D.C. to see his work. So it was amazing when we walked in there and saw it.
Thanks for that, Veronica. Another early black-owned business that is not either, it's not technically either in the Meadows or in the Cinch, is the Little Red Hen Coffee Shop.
Woo! Alan!
And she provided cupcakes today.
Take it away, Veronica.
Okay, the Little Red Hen has been part of Altadena's landscape for well over 60 years. The last 50 years, it has been owned and operated by one African-American family, the Shea family. Miss Rena Mae Shea purchased the restaurant in 1972 from Miss Doris Wendell, and it remains open today. It has been passed down from generation to generation. Miss Shea became an entrepreneur back in the day when women were not encouraged to be business owners, and especially not a black woman business owner. There were barriers for obtaining a small business loan for African Americans in the early 70s, but this did not deter Ms. Shea. She purchased the business with money she saved from her silk finishing business, and contributions of money from family members helped her pay for the purchase of the restaurant. She worked at her restaurant for over 30 years. She was a role model for her 12 children and paved the way for them to become independent business owners in their own right. Ms. Shea retired in the late 80s, and her son, Lonze Shea, took over the business. After the passing of Mr. Lonze Shea, his sister, Barbara, now operates the restaurant and has added a contemporary flair.
Okay.
Veronica, I'm sorry. Miss Shea's son is here.
Okay, and they even have vegetarian options on the menu. The coffee shop remains pretty much as it did 50 years ago, the image of the local diner with red stools and a counter. When one enters, you immediately feel the charm, comfort, and warmth. It is not a fast food place, but a place to take a moment and enjoy the simple life that Altadena can bring. The oldest remaining Black-owned business in Altadena. Now we have a clip of Miss Barbara Shea. So we can go on.
Okay.
It's kind of important. Okay, well, we can move on and then we can come back to.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, here we go, with starting with Miss Barbara Shea's legacy. So if you had seen the clip, you would have heard that one of the things Ms. Shea talked about is, one of the things she mentioned in the clip was Mr. Floyd Norman. And here's some interesting facts about Mr. Norman. He was a Disney animator, and again, if you had seen the clip, there's a piece of his artwork in the Little Red Hen. Mr. Floyd Norman walked into the Disney lot just out of high school and asked the animators how he could work there someday. The animators took the time to share with him about the studio and encourage him to go to school, which he did. He attended the Art Center in Pasadena, and then shortly after graduating in 1957, Mr. Norman was hired at Disney Studios, and in 2007, he was named as a Disney legend. Like his favorite character of all time, Mickey Mouse, Mr. Norman is a classic. Now in his 80s, Floyd Norman can be seen regularly on the Disney lot, mentoring and encouraging future generations of artists. He is quoted as saying, "Today, work is more like fun. I get paid to play." Okay. So moving on to the cinch, as Carrie pointed out, the cinch is named for the streets that comprise the neighborhood, founded by Sacramento to the north, Casitas Avenue to the east, Figueroa Drive to the south, and El Sol to the west. So that's this area here, in the blue area. Essentially, it's the intersection of Figueroa Drive and Lincoln 1972, as we mentioned earlier, was the founding year of the cinch, and we'll hear more about that in a bit. But first, I'm just going to mention some of the other notable African Americans we'll talk about in this segment. Dr. Isaac J. Walker, Robert Bob Lucas, Carlotta Martin, and Lieutenant Oliver Goodall. So we start with Dr. Isaac J. Walker and Walker Drug Store.
Okay, Mr. Isaac J. Walker, I knew him personally. He worked in Altadena for more than 45 years. Dr. Walker owned and operated the first black pharmacy in Altadena for over 30 years, located at Lincoln and Altadena Drive. The pharmacy was Walker's Drugs. He served his country by joining the Army, Air Force, and becoming one of the celebrated Tuskegee Airmen in 1944, serving in World War II. In 1944, the Tuskegee Airmen was a segregated unit of the U.S. Army Air Corps fighting. The U.S. Army Air Corps fighting in World War II. So they're an Army Air Corps that fought in World War II. Dr. Walker graduated from Howard University at the School of Pharmacy in 1956 and went on to receive his doctorate from USC in 1962. He helped many Altadena and Pasadena residents by offering reduced cost medicine and sometimes medicine at no cost at all. And I'm one of the recipients of that. If the patient had no money and no insurance, you still might get your medicine. He paid school tuition for neighborhood kids. He even paid the expenses for the funeral of a neighbor because of the family's inability to pay. Dr. Walker helped so many families in our area without ever seeking praise or recognition for his kindness. After 35 years of business, he retired. Even though he retired from being a business owner, he continued the practice he started in his pharmacy of providing food for those that were in need. He helped establish food pantries at 7 different churches in the Altadena, Pasadena area. His positive outlook was infectious and served to brighten the lives of all those who came in contact with him. He was symbolic of what an Altadena resident is. Next, we move on to Bob Lucas. His son is supposed to be here. Is Isaac here?
Right here.
Okay, next we move on to Bob Lucas and the Bob Lucas Library and Literacy Center. There are some seats up here. There's one here. There's 2 here and 1 over there, 3 seats.
There's one here.
Okay, raise your hand if there's a seat. Okay, come on up. And just... All right. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Bob Lucas and the Bob Lucas Memorial Library and Literacy Center.
Which you probably all know is a satellite of the Altadena library system that's located in the cinch. So, Mr. William Bob Lucas was well known in the community as a journalism pioneer, writer, photographer, and activist. Lucas was a member of the Altadena community for 19 years. He worked as a writer for the Los Angeles Sentinel and Johnson Publications, both Ebony and Jet. If you're a person of a certain age, you definitely remember those publications. I'm not saying. The Los Angeles Sentinel was founded in 1933, the Johnson Publications in 1942. All 3 publications were owned and run by African Americans. Bob Lucas became one of the first well-known African American writers in the early 1940s and 50s. He was successful in writing for both newspapers and for television. Mr. Lucas moved to Los Angeles after traveling to the city with Life magazine photographer Gordon Parks, who was also renowned as a musician, writer, and film director. And maybe he'll be a subject of one of our future segments. Lucas moved to Altadena in 1971 and resided here until his death in 1990. Mr. Lucas was, as I said, was a literacy advocate. He helped establish the Bob Lucas Altadena Library branch, which is named after him, on the west side of Altadena. And his goal was to ensure that the African American communities had access to services. So there's a picture of the Bob Lucas Memorial Library and Literacy Center. Just as a little personal aside, this is a bench that some dedicated members from Christmas Tree Lane, Ms. Mary Landau is out in the audience, she's a board member. There's some Steve Rose, Scott Wardlow, Tony Ward, and Jerry Friedman and others got together and put this bench together. It's from a deodar from Christmas Tree Lane that had succumbed to the elements. It took a few years of curing to get the wood ready for construction into this bench, but it's now completed and installed. Just waiting for a dedication plot or for you to come over and visit and have a seat and enjoy. So here's a photo of the Bob Lucas family at the 30th anniversary ceremony of the reopening of the library in October 2021. This is, as you can see my point, that's Tony Ward, and Tony Ward's mother is Shirley Ward, and she's 98, and she and Bob Lucas are first cousins. So that's quite a family legacy. And speaking of family legacy, that leads us into our next profile, which is of the Sharon family and the founder of the Cinch.
Okay, we have a star right here in our midst, Carlotta Martin. Her father started Cinch. I'm a member of Cinch. Mrs. Martin's father, Joseph Sharon, started the first neighborhood watch group, Cinch, in 1970. Cinch is still a very active neighborhood group, 52 years after its inception. Cinch created a desirable, safe neighborhood for Black residents in Altadena. Cinch still has a major influence on what happens in our communities. Now, we're going to hear from Mrs. Martin.
Via video, hopefully.
We're here in the home with Ms. Charlotte Martin, and we are in the middle, or I'd say we're well ensconced in what is known as the Cinch area of Altadena, and this area is one of the, as you folks in the audience know by now, is one of the areas that was featured in the Altadena survey. So we're going to get a little bit more personal history about the area of Cinch from Ms. Martin, because her father was fundamental in establishing this residential area that's known as the Cinch. So, Ms. Martin, can you give us a little bit of that history?
Yes, that I know.
Okay.
It started in the 70s, 1970, and the main purpose was because the saying was JPL wanted to take this area. And we had a couple of homes that were trying to be condemned. And they were trying to get their eminent domain, and they figured by all of us blacks being around here that it was going to go down anyway.
Right.
It was a stereotype.
Right.
And he was determined. And so my father walked around, and the things that he noticed that needed to be cared for, he would talk to the owners and volunteer to even help straighten it out. And little by little, various ones decided that they would get together, and they agreed to form the Cinch. And Cinch is actually an acronym for the streets. Until later when Kenyatta came and joined us. And the main purpose was to keep friends, neighbors together and protected. To keep the black neighborhood clean, decent, family-oriented. And he succeeded. And I'm very proud of him that he cared. And now, things have changed to the point wherein it's not so much redlined like it used to be.
Right.
Because, you know about that?
Right.
Because of the fact that we're now diverse. It's not all blacks anymore.
Right.
It is now turning around and it's coming back to where it used to be. And that's all I can tell you to sum up everything. So you ask me the questions you want to.
Well, you've done a really excellent job of summarizing the history, and I think giving us a better feel for the area, because I think that, you know, the common thought is it was just like a neighborhood watch kind of thing, but it was much more than that.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
It started out, you know, watching it, but it became family.
Yeah, it became family. That's an excellent way to summarize it.
Okay, another notable resident from the cinch is Lieutenant Olive Goodall.
You're here.
Okay, so Lieutenant Oliver Goodall, before I get started with that, I just want to say, Ms. Martin, it was a pleasure doing the interview with you. I am not a professional videographer, so you know, I made the cardinal mistake of being too close to the mic. So I apologize for that. Anyway, Honorable Lieutenant Oliver Goodall, who was a civic leader well known in the community. Goodall entered the U.S. Army Corps in 1943 before going on to become part of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. In 2010, the NAACP honored Goodall with their Rosa Parks Legacy Award. Goodall played a key role in the Freeman Field Mutiny. That was a group of 60 black officers who refused to use the segregated black soldiers' quarters, and thus sparked a movement for integrating the armed forces. And this also provided a model for future civil rights efforts. Lieutenant Goodall lived in Altadena for over 50 years and made an impact on the community as an activist. He was a well-known face in the Altadena community and continuously worked to better the community. He's quoted as saying, "You have to help the ones that come after you." In January 2020, a plaque was added to his former home in Altadena. This is his former home, that's the plaque. And the plaque reads, Lieutenant Oliver Goodall lived at 679 West Harriet Street from 1961 until his death in 2010 and made a powerful impact on his adopted communities of Altadena and Pasadena, in addition to contributing to elevating the dignity and civil rights of African Americans in this country. So here's some photos from that sunny afternoon, February 16, 2020, celebrating the unveiling of the monument. The current resident of Goodall's old home, Eugene Hutchins, along with his committee of other Altadena residents, including my most able presenter here, Veronica Jones, they wanted to recognize Mr. Goodall as part of the African American History Month events in 2020. In 2011, by an act of Congress, the Italian Renaissance Post Office on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena was named in honor of First Lieutenant Oliver Goodall. So we move on to another profile particularly significant with Veronica, and that is Miss Ellen Garrison Clark.
Yes, Ellen Garrison Clark. She's close to my heart. She was an African-American woman, anti-slavery activist, civil rights advocate, and educator. She was buried at the Altadena Mountain View Cemetery. She had been buried there without a headstone since 1892, until last year, Juneteenth, 2021. Mrs. Clark was lot of you here helped that happen. So I thank you. Mrs. Clark was the direct descendant of freed slaves. Her father was a runaway slave. Her mother was the daughter of a freed slave. And her family was deeply involved with the civil rights activists in Concord, Massachusetts. Believing that it was her duty to elevate her own race, she spent 25 years teaching in the freedmen's schools in Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and Kansas. She spent her life fighting for civil rights for blacks in America. Long before Rosa Parks, she tested the Civil Rights Act of 1866 by suing a Baltimore train station after being forcibly removed from a segregated ladies' waiting room. Her case eventually was dismissed by a Maryland grand jury. We all stand on Miss Clark's shoulders. Mrs. Clark made the education of blacks and civil rights her mission in life. We suspect that she spent her life in Altadena and Pasadena area teaching blacks to read and write. And you know it was illegal to teach blacks to read and write. On December 21st, 1892, Mrs. Clark died and was laid to rest at Mountain View Cemetery. The Altadena Historical Society and the Altadena community of family friends came together to celebrate Mrs. Clark on June 19, 2021, Juneteenth, by laying a headstone on her grave. And part of the money we raised is one of the scholarships that we give here today. Mrs. Clark was known to say, "We must live as we climb." Now we move on to Mr. Clarence B. Jones.
And I just want to give Veronica and the Historical Society an additional round of applause. A very important milestone to accomplish. All right, so Clarence B. Jones, born January 8, 1931 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was a legal advisor, speechwriter, and civil rights leader. He served as a major fundraiser and organizer for the civil rights movement. His parents, Marilyn and Goldshore Jones, actually were live-in domestics. So, he came from a humble beginning. And as a result of his parents being live-in domestics, he grew up in foster homes and in a Catholic boarding school in eastern Pennsylvania, run by the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. Mr. Jones was drafted into the U.S. Army during the Korean War. However, he refused to sign a loyalty oath at the time of his induction to the Army. He was discharged probably on that basis and as a security risk, and also, he had a history of activity in left-wing politics as a college student, so that probably didn't help either. But not deterred, he went on to get his BA degree from Columbia in 1956. In 1959, he obtained a law degree from Boston University School of Law. And in 1960, he moved to Altadena to pursue an entertainment and intellectual property law practice. The following year, in 1961, he joined the defense team of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to defend King on charges of fraud that had been brought by the state of Alabama. After King's acquittal, Dr. Jones then moved to Harlem, New York to work with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. Clarence B. Jones is also the co-author of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1963 I Have a Dream speech. Yeah. And in 1967, at the age of 36, Jones became the first African American to be named an allied member of the New York Stock Exchange. Currently, he is a scholar in residence at the Martin Luther King Jr. Institute at Stanford University. And some of you may have seen last year in 2021, Dr. Jones was featured in the Neighbors magazine. And I understand that's how you have a...
Right, I helped co-write the article. I got to talk to him on the phone. And he's quite a character, very alert, and I think he was turning 89 when he was able to tell us the whole story. One thing I remember, he said that the nuns told him every day that he was loved, that he was smart, and that he could do anything.
That's the kind of affirmation we know. Okay, so that covers, our major presentations, but we have one more. But before we go on, some of the other people, as Carrie mentioned earlier, was Robert Owens, a very interesting character who bought his freedom and then ultimately bought the freedom for his other family members and wound up working, he had a lumber business in El Prieto Canyon, which, I don't know if I think the name El Prieto is Spanish for dark one. So I think that, his presence led to the naming of the canyon. Anyway, he would take this lumber from, up in, the foothills and take it all the way down to LA and provide it for the US Army. So, he's quite an individual, and also he was instrumental in, if you've heard about Biddy Mason, she was a very notable African-American. He was responsible for getting her involved in real estate initially. And then, of course, as Carrie mentioned also, there's Tony Stewart. Yeah. She was, she formed the Altadena chapter of the NAACP, and she fought for the rights of the black community until her death in 2011. She's just... She's described as a force to be reckoned with. And, she received the Racial Justice Award in 2010 for her community work. So, as I said, this is the third iteration of this presentation, and we have a new segment, and that segment is dedicated, or not dedicated, but is about the Pampered Lady Florist, and we have the Pampered Lady Florist here in the house today. So, Veronica? Oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm going to play the presentation, I'm sorry. There's the Pampered Lady Florist at New York and Lake. And here is the pamphlet.
My name is Carolyn Roddy, and I'm the owner of Pampered Lady Florist. I'm the mother of one daughter and 4 stepsons. I started here in 1983, and I formerly worked for the County of Los Angeles. But I rehabbed and became the florist. And this was my first location and my only location. I love flowers, and I think I started flowers because I was a seamstress. I made my daughter's prom clothes, my clothes. Whenever I go somewhere, I make me an outfit. So I think it's the creative ability. And you imagine what you want to make, and you go from there. I like working with people. I started this business from scratch, and I've been here 39 years. I like what I do. I'm here at 1920 North Lake Avenue in Altadena, California. And this is my hometown as well. I lived here for 48 years. My kids grew up here, they go to school here, and my grandchildren also grew up here, and they like it pretty much. They want to go back to North Carolina, but we do. I'm the owner of Pampered Lady Florist.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So there's the, and we have provided a bouquet here for us today.
And the lace.
Yeah, we got a little bit of another segment here.
She's been in business. Okay. My proudest moment is rehabbing with students from the high school. They came here to get additional credits, and they have come every holiday to help. They were 17 years old, and now they're in their early 40s, and they keep coming back. We had as many as
maybe 20 students. And it's good to know that I'm like their mother here in the community. And they have children as well. So that's one of my proudest moments. Also to help people that are looking for work and can't find it anywhere else. Maybe they have a background problem and now they come here to work. And it's just giving back to the community.
What a way to
I'm
give back.
glad about that.
That's great. That's really investing back into the community because you're empowering somebody.
Yes, yes. And I got a certificate on the wall there from the assemblyman.
Oh, Chris Holden?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And quietly in the back is the Honorable Mr. Holden.
Come on up.
Okay, one last segment here.
He retired and then he came here to continue to work for me. He said he had never worked as hard as he did when he came here. So he continued to work, and in his later days before his passing, he would come in and sit in a chair at the door and look out. And if he needed to deliver, he would deliver, but he would have someone go with him to get out to make the delivery, to take it to the door. So he worked for at least 38 and a half years until his health started failing.
That's great.
And he enjoyed coming in, sitting down, he'd bring me lunch when he come through here. So we had a good relationship.
And he supported your dream.
He supported. We had some arguments. Because he figured I worked too long and too hard, and he was ready to go home, and so everything mellowed out.
That's great.
Okay, so here's Mr. Merriam.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for your attention and listening to us. It's exciting for me and Steve to do this, and we keep updating and adding to it. We hope to have the Galloways in here soon. We have some, we didn't get to interview them in person, so we're waiting to put that segment on, but we do have them on the presentation, so look forward to seeing the Galloways. And thank you. And just remember what Ellen Garrison Clark would do. She says, we must lift as we climb.
All right.
And just my party remarks is that you saw that a lot of the people that we highlighted in the survey are women, African American women. It's no secret. Forced to be reckoned with. and my co-presenter, Ms. Veronica Jones, has done so much, not only to make this possible today, but all these other things with Earl and Garrison Clark and the Goodall Memorial. So one more round of applause.
And I'm just going to just make a little insert here. We're going to insert our Assemblyman Chris Holden here. He is our secret special guest.
Well, good afternoon. Well, first of all, let me just thank Veronica Jones and Steve McCall for their great presentation, and for all of those who were part of bringing this community together and celebrating this Juneteenth holiday session or season. This is a unique, is apart from previous Juneteenth celebrations, because this one is one where we recognize that the President of the United States has declared it a national holiday. And so that is a very important. Let me also say that we were able to approve a resolution last week recognizing Juneteenth as a day of celebration but that also we have an Assembly Bill 1655 that also recognizes Juneteenth as a California state holiday. So we're very happy to be able to join in recognizing these important milestones in this important day, a day where we can all learn and grow and celebrate the diversity, learn from culture, learn from the African American experience, to be able to celebrate along with all those who have a history and a legacy of what it meant to have a Juneteenth, to have a freedom from oppression. And as we still go forward today, we still have challenges as a society, but we all work together, we make the difference. And so I'm very happy to say thank you to all of you for allowing me to have the opportunity to represent you in Sacramento. It is indeed an honor, and I look forward to the next 2 years to be able to serve you and represent you. And it's my pleasure today to recognize 2 young people who have made a tremendous accomplishment in their life to this point. And certainly what we try to do is, one of the things that I'm really excited about, when I was elected to the Assembly back in 2012, the amount of funding that went into education was at the bottom of 50 states. Today, we could probably say that we are now in the top 10 of funding for our young people. And so it's a great pleasure to be able to see these young people thrive, especially those who had to endure a pandemic and have learning experiences that were impacted and their social experiences impacted to some degree. But here we are, and we are very proud of these 2 young people. And if I can call them forward right now, Breland Carter and Devin Hardy. The fact that I finished at Pasadena High School, since we were proud. But we are proud of our young people, and I always remember when I was in high school, it didn't matter what school you went to. Everybody knew each other and supported each other, and so we're very proud of you, and we're also proud of the work that's being done around John Muir in terms of early college school, and I think that's really important. It ties into dual enrollment, which we put forth back in 2015. And that's to give high school students a chance to take college courses while in high school. And so we celebrate you today. Thank you for your great work, and we know that you're going to go on and do great things in the future, and God bless you.
Veronica. Yeah, get in your picture.
And if I could, in Altadena, you're very blessed to have a very active and engaged Altadena Historic Society, to be able to gather information that we were able to witness today and to see the history of the people who were part of the fabric of Altadena. And so in celebrating this Juneteenth celebration of 2022, I wanted to make sure that we recognize the Altadena Historic Society for its great work all the time, but certainly what you've been able to do today in celebration of Juneteenth. We thank you, and Veronica, I don't know if you or Jane are going to be receiving.
Jane left in a place of honesty. Nobody.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
They put all this in the hard classes.
Put it down on it.
a little bit about the sequencing. I figured out what I should have done when Mrs. Shay's video came out, or a little vignette. So I'd like to play it now for you. It'll just take a few minutes because she's so generous in providing us with refreshments, and it's a neat interview. So here we go. Click and hold. Yeah, it's just doesn't. She does not want to be. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. So I tried.
Yeah, we'll get it on the website. Yeah, it's a good interview.
Anyway, also we have some courtesy of the library for the printing and to Sappho's for the creation. We have a driving map of some of the locations that we mentioned in the video, in the presentation, and then there's like a little map on the back, so you can take a little drive of historic Altadena.
I'm not a native of Altadena like so many of you. Like, only came here 40 years ago. I'm so proud of this town and discovering these things about it. It's amazing. So we want to carry on with the Garrison Clark Scholarship. We have a presentation of our two recipients, and we'll bring out Pam Wright from the Altadena Historical Society to give them the scholarship.
Veronica, when we talked about me doing this, you didn't tell me I was going to follow Chris Holt. Hey, Carla.
I love.
Okay. Wouldn't Ellen Garrison Clark be proud if she could see all of us here today and learn about these two wonderful young people that I'm about to introduce? Brylan, Brylan, I have trouble with your name, I'm sorry. She graduated this year. Everybody who talked about her talks about what a wonderful, conscientious, helpful person that she is, with great integrity, passion, and commitment. Recognize yourself here. And able to balance the rigor of academics with an athletic schedule. She works hard, she plays hard, gives her time and talent to the community, and has proven herself to be a true leader who inspires her peers. I have a lady for you. And you will come up. Made by someone you just heard of. Now, the really important part.
Good afternoon. First, I would just like to thank Ms. Veronica and the Altadena Historic Society for this great opportunity. As mentioned, my family has been residents of Altadena for over 50 years. My grandma has owned a business here for 40 years, so it's really honorable to me to be honored today. And I can assure you that my passion for community service will lead me back here someday, and I thank you all.
I failed to mention that she's going to college at Morgan State University and wants to be a nurse. My personal belief is that doctors prescribe and nurses heal. Okay, Devin. A lifelong Altadena resident, he it's going on to PCC and will be playing sports. Devin is a member of MPYD, which is an organization that was new to my experience. I hope that you all know about it.
Yes, we do.
Described as the mission of the group, for those who didn't know, if you didn't know, the group provides mentoring, academic support, social skills development, and career development to young men at your high school. So, never worn a lei before? I look very handsome. I feel like we're in Hawaii. Thank you. Now, guess what? I don't know why it's sticking to the envelope here, but it is. Tell you what, take the whole thing.
Good afternoon, and my name is Devin Hardy, and first off I would like to thank the Altadena Historical Society for giving me this chance, giving me this scholarship to further my academic career. I plan on becoming a computer scientist, I plan on majoring in it. I find that interesting. I would also like to thank Mr. Humphrey Shackleford and MPYD staff for guiding me throughout my whole high school career and helping me find my career. I also like to thank my parents, my brothers in the back, for every day pushing me hard. Become a better person, and yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Wow, these young people are so well spoken. I look forward to having them come back in 30 years or so. I'll be here. So we have, coming to the end, but we have a special presentation by Marie Campbell, the president of the Southwest Environmental Incorporated.
I had the great pleasure of meeting Veronica through the Altadena work that we did. And Veronica asked if I'd come today to say a quick word about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think this is such a joyous celebration that we're having today. It's such an honor to be with all of you, and so interesting to hear about so many amazing, successful people in our community. I also am a resident of Altadena, and I have my business headquartered in Pasadena. I serve as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair for the California Association of Environmental Professionals. And one of the things, I'm one of 2 people of color that sit on a board of 32 people. 32 people. So not representative of the state of California. So one of the things that we're really looking at is how can we invite more people to participate in the environmental professions. And that's really what equity is all about. It's creating opportunities for many, many people so that everyone can make the choices that are best suited for them to be successful. And inclusion is beyond just creating the opportunity. It's when someone identifies themselves as wanting to be part of a group, really taking an active role to bring them in and make them feel welcome. And today has been a great opportunity for me to reflect on how many people have touched my life and created the opportunities. But I was struck by a poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I'm not going to read the whole poem because Veronica said it'd be very short. But I did want to read the final lines of the poem to you because I think they're so fitting for this joyous celebration that we're having today. What is success is the title of the poem. I remember that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote this poem almost 200 years ago, and the words are as meaningful today as when he wrote them. To leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exultation. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is what it is to have succeeded. So with that, I'd like to thank you for letting me join you today. And Carrie and I would like to present this, not the real check, but to support the ongoing scholarship fund for the Altenew Historical Society.
A matching $1,000 donation for the scholarship fund.
Daria Dupree to stay here. She is going to have the closing remarks to the end this amazing program. I don't know about you, but it's beyond what I expected. She's going to give us a closing remarks, and she's from the Altadena Historical Society, and be sure to stay and have some refreshments before you go.
Well, thank you all very much for coming today. We hope this was educational for you, but also fun. I hope you got to see people in the community. I want to, on behalf of the Historical Society, really thank the Altadena Library, Steve and Veronica. You know, we feel endlessly lucky to have Veronica Jones on our board at the Historical Society. She's done incredible things to move us forward, and we hope to continue on this path moving forward. It was great hearing these histories. If any of you have a history that we don't know about, or you think the community should know about, we would love to learn more. So please reach out to us. We're always happy to get involved in these kinds of things. We want to preserve the history of Altadena, but we also want to share it back with you. So thank you so much for coming today. Please do stay and have some of the beautiful cupcakes that were provided by Red Hen. Enjoy the beautiful flowers from the Pampered Lady. And we also have a beautiful cake that Shauna Beer provided. And I have not seen it yet, but I've seen pictures of her cakes and they're incredible. So thank you everyone very much for being here. Congratulations to our scholarship awardee. We can't wait to see what you do in your lives. So congratulations. Thank you.